To ask the First Minister whether the Scottish Government will comply with the Scottish Information Commissioner's ruling that files relating to James Hamilton's investigation into whether the former First Minister Nicola Sturgeon broke the ministerial code must be published by 22nd January 2026.
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government will comply with the Commissioner's decision and will do so as soon as practically possible. I do not expect this will take much longer. The courts have made it clear the identities of those who complained in relation to allegations of sexual assault must have their identities protected, and there are no circumstances in which I will do anything that risks breaking those court orders. I cannot release information which would breach those court orders and amount to a contempt of court.
Katie Clark.
The Scottish Government has wasted millions of pounds of taxpayers' money fighting court cases, with 2 further appeals relating to the salmon files before the Court of Session later this month. Will the First Minister ensure full disclosure by releasing all of the salmon files? And if he won't commit to this today, will he at least release information which has not been contested through the appeals process? And if the Scottish Government loses the appeals, will he commit to not using his veto? My Freedom of Information Reform Bill would strengthen the powers of the Information Commissioner, preventing the late disclosure of information, which happened here, introduce proactive disclosure and abolish the First Minister's veto. Will he look closely at my bill, which is supported by the current Information Commissioner and all the previous holders of the role, as it would help deliver openness, accountability and transparency, which were the founding principles of this Parliament?
First Minister.
We will, of course, look at the bill and consider its contents, but it is really important that I am clear with Parliament why the Government is acting in the way that it is acting. The Scottish Government has handled nearly 90 freedom of information requests and reviews relating to the James Hamilton investigation. We are also responding to 96% of information requests on time against a backdrop of rising request numbers. In relation to the particular case that Katie Clark raises with me, the Government will comply with the Commissioner's decision, but I have to be absolutely satisfied that there is no risk that court orders that protect the identities of individuals who have complained in relation to allegations of sexual assault are in any way disclosed as a consequence. I will be clear with Parliament, I will not do that. And I'm very surprised that Katie Clark wants me to release all of the information, because if I released all of the information, I would breach court orders, and I will not do that. So the Government is appealing 2 other cases which we believe would result in us committing contempt of court, and I will not do that. So the Government has, as I've said already, has handled nearly 90 freedom of information requests, but I have a legal responsibility. I have a responsibility in the ministerial code to obey the court orders that are in place, and I want to be crystal clear with Parliament. I will do nothing to jeopardise that.
Fergus Ewing.
But what the First Minister hasn't said, presiding officer, is that James Hamilton, when he produced his report, himself, in public, in an unprecedented move, expressed his severe reservations with the redactions that he was required to make. And moreover, the orders made regarding the release of further information have been made by David Hamilton, the Freedom of Information Commissioner. Now, the First Minister will accept that both James and David Hamilton are individuals of the highest repute and integrity, and they would not invite him to do anything that was illegal. So my question is this: isn't the First Minister using the excuse of jigsaw identification as a human shield, as a pretext for declining to release information, because the real reason is it will cause extreme embarrassment to several people who are in the Scottish Government now and previously were in that trusted position?
First Minister.
I cannot find it in myself to associate myself with the words that Mr Ewing has made of the, quotes, excuse of jigsaw identification. Because that question lies at the very heart of the provision of statute in this country. And my duty as First Minister at all times is to obey the law. And Mr Ewing is inviting me to be cavalier with the orders that have been passed by a court in this country, and I want to be crystal clear with Parliament, I will do not one bit of it.
Murdo Fraser.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I wonder if the First Minister appreciates what a bad look it is for his government to be spending huge sums of taxpayers' money contesting rulings from the Independent Information Commissioner. David Hamilton is an experienced and respected professional who has spent his entire career in Scotland's justice system. Does the First Minister really think he would be asking the Scottish Government to do something that would be unlawful?
First Minister.
The Government has made clear that we believe the Information Commissioner has erred in law in relation to two of the cases that the Government is appealing. And Mr Fraser is a lawyer. He knows full well the obligations that I carry as First Minister to ensure that the Government at all times complies with the law. And where I believe there is a risk of jeopardy in that respect, I will ensure that the Government acts within the law, and that's exactly what I'm doing.
Thank you.
Ask the First Minister for what reason the Scottish Government is going to court to continue to allow it to house male prisoners in the female prison estate, in light of any projections it has made of the cost to taxpayers in Scotland of challenging the Supreme Court ruling in this way.
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, the judgment of the Supreme Court is accepted by the Scottish Government. What we are doing, as any responsible government must, is ensuring our policies comply with all of our legal obligations, including the Scotland Act and the European Convention on Human Rights. Every key area of government which is or may be affected by the Supreme Court judgment is carrying out assessments across legislation, guidance and policies, and in some areas changes have already been made. The prisons guidance has not been changed, and it can be taken from that the Scottish Government has concluded that it does not need to be changed in light of the Supreme Court judgment. For Women Scotland has brought proceedings challenging that conclusion, as they are entitled to do so. The matter is now before the court. The Scottish Government has to make difficult decisions which balance the interests and rights of individuals, often in complex situations, and this is one such situation.
Douglas Ross.
I'm not allowed to call the First Minister a liar, but that answer was not truthful. Well, I've just said I'm not allowed to do it, but he's not giving a truthful answer. It is desperate stuff from the First Minister. How on earth can he stand up here and say the government is respecting the Supreme Court ruling when it's in court arguing the very opposite? And First Minister, these actions threaten women's safety. Right now, at this very moment, there are 3 biological males housed in Scotland's female prison estate. Alex Stewart was jailed for 19 years for murder after stabbing his victim 16 times in the chest. Melissa Young was jailed for 20 years for murder and left his victim with 29 injuries from multiple stab wounds. And Paris Green was jailed for 18 years for torture and murder. He recently assaulted a female member of staff, but has still not been moved to a male prison. So let me ask the First Minister this. These evil killers are all housed with women prisoners. Are they male or female?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, as I indicated in my earlier answer, the Scottish Government has got to ensure that on all occasions our policies comply with our legal obligations, including the Scotland Act and the European Convention on Human Rights. So in these situations, the Government has got to wrestle with complex situations and make difficult decisions that balance and reflect the
Let's hear the First Minister.
The interests and rights of individuals. Now, this is a matter that is actively in front of the courts at this time. Now, the Scottish ministers appreciate the public interest in this case, and in the particular circumstances of this case, and in the interest of open justice, the Government will publish our written case, that being our answers to the judicial review and our note of argument, ahead of the hearing due to begin on the 3rd of February. Making the materials lodged with the court publicly available will allow anyone with an interest to follow in a well-informed way what is said in court. I stress this is a matter that is actively in front of the court, and the Government is trying to make information available to ensure that members of the public can follow the case in a well-informed way.
I call Ruth Maguire.
Presiding Officer, the need for protection of space for women who sit at board tables has been accepted and the law corrected. But a policy that means female prisoners, a majority of whom have experienced male violence, may have to share close quarters with male-bodied inmates while in the care of the state is being defended. Knowing everything that we do about trauma, given the countless testimonies by women on this matter, including both privately and publicly by a number of his own party colleagues, does the First Minister understand just how appalling the Government's actions feel to many of us, and how difficult it is to reconcile the Scottish Government's words on the protection of single-sex spaces for females with their actions on this matter?
First Minister. Thank you. Thank you.
President, I acknowledge and understand and appreciate the strength of feeling that is expressed to me by Ruth Maguire, and I understand that, and I understand the views and the points that she makes and that she expresses on behalf of those who have had traumatic experiences. But I stress what I said in my earlier answer. The judgment of the Supreme Court is accepted by the Scottish Government. What we are doing is ensuring that our policies comply with all of our legal obligations, including the Scotland Act and the European Convention on Human Rights, and the Government is obliged to ensure that that is the case. And we have considered this issue, and the actions that we are taking are consistent with that consideration.
Pauline McNeill.
So the Government claim that they do accept the Supreme Court ruling and the definition of women in the Equality Act, but I'm not certain that they do. And to be honest, I am not sure the First Minister fully understands the impact that this is having, because they have chosen to advance an argument in court that a blanket ban on housing trans women in the women's estate may violate their human rights under the European Convention on Human Rights. So what consideration did the Government give to the human rights of female prisoners to serve their sentence with dignity and safety from male-bodied prisoners? So I asked the First Minister today, in the likely event that the Government will lose this court case in the light of the Supreme Court judgment, when will the Government soon after comply with this judgment, and will that policy be changed as a matter of urgency?
First Minister.
Pauline McNeill indicated that questioned the Government's acceptance of the Supreme Court judgment, and I want to say once again the Government accepts unreservedly the Supreme Court judgment. As a consequence, we have revised policy guidance that is in place in other areas of policy to ensure compatibility with the Supreme Court judgment. In the case of the guidance on prisoners, the Government has made an assessment, and that is now being tested in the courts, and the issue will be determined by the courts. And out of the respect that I have for the decision-making in the courts, I want to make sure the court is free to make its judgment on the application of the guidance that the Government has put in place.
Late yesterday, the Scottish Times reported that the Scottish Government has written to the UK Government's Advocate General to inform her that, should their other legal arguments against the ruling of the Supreme Court in favour of 4 Women Scotland fail, They wish a further remedy to be explored in the form of a declaration of incompatibility on human rights grounds. At the same time, multiple statements from the First Minister and others in Cabinet have been made in this chamber that they fully accept the Supreme Court ruling and are working to implement it. Presiding Officer, I'm confused. I'm not asking for comment on any legal action, but I am asking how the statements made in this chamber are compatible with the actions taken in secret by the Scottish Government.
First Minister.
President Officer, in this respect, there are live legal proceedings underway, and there will be elements of my comments that are restricted because of that fact. But what the government is doing is exactly what we told Parliament we were doing, which is taking forward the steps to ensure that we have the correct guidance arrangements in place to deal with the implications of the Supreme Court ruling. And that is the work the government is undertaking and is always undertaking in this respect.